March 31st, 2022 meeting. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second. Any modifications or discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The minutes are officially adopted unanimously.
Just
Second
for
order.
Stu,
What's the matter?
whoever was not here last time, or on March 31st, should not vote.
Who?
Yeah, I'll abstain. I wasn't here.
Okay, so one abstention.
I wasn't here, but.
We have a full board. That's reason for celebration. Okay, the second order of business to adopt the resolutions from the March 31st, or the resolution from the March 31st, 2022 meeting V79082M1. Is there a motion to approve that resolution?
Make a motion. Motion to approve, or second?
Mike Cheslick moved, Mike Stanton second. Any modifications or discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition, any abstentions?
I'll abstain. I wasn't here.
Okay, the resolutions are officially adopted. The board will now conduct the public hearings on today's agenda. The way we work it is, first, the applicant or the applicant's representative will state the reasons for their requested variance and present any material or documentation which is to be considered regarding the proposal. Next, persons wishing to speak in favor of the proposal will be given the opportunity to address the board. Then persons who wish to speak in opposition will be allowed to address the board. Finally, the applicant or a representative will be given the option to make any closing arguments or comments to the board. Following the public hearings this afternoon, the board may make a decision on each application heard. The board may also decide to hold its decision until the next public hearing. The hearing is closed. No additional information will be allowed into the record except for the information that the board may request. That information will be available for the public at the zoning office in City Hall Commons. Staff will now introduce the first application.
The first application is 3-22-01, a use variance request to establish accessory parking for a code 2's apartment building by meeting uses permitted on property located at 3020 James Street, owned by the American Legion Post 1266, general residential class A1, and local business class A.
Is there a representative here? Anybody, please, who comes to speak in the microphone, first state your name and your address, then go ahead and speak.
Mr. Chairman, before we start with the comments, I just want to say that I'm going to be abstaining from participating in the discussion and voting on the case. I'm Senior Vice President of the Community Preservation Corporation, and we're providing the financing for this project.
Duly noted, thank you.
Hello, Terry Horse Landscape Architecture. I am the landscape architect for the project. So this is, if you're familiar with the location, I have a site plan. I'm sorry, I don't have a tripod. So it's an existing building which is currently housing the American Legion. They are relocating just down the street to DeWitt. And in doing so, Stephen Skinner will be developing the building into 29 apartments. There already is the parking. You got it upside down, Steve.
Well, I didn't know if you want to do it from that way, James Street. I didn't know if you wanted to.
Oh, okay. No, I have the building on the top. So the building is outlined, and the parking lot is the shaded area below it. So it is an existing parking lot, though we are modifying it to meet current codes with some setbacks and screening for the residential areas and providing some stormwater. There'll be some new lighting associated with this, and street trees and improvements to obviously the building itself, but some landscaping in the front as well.
So the parking lot's there,
Yes.
and the variance is all about the parking lot?
Yeah.
Right? So what are the differences? Why do you need to apply?
All right, so the building itself is in the BA zone, and the parking lot is in a residential zone. So it's a split zone on one property, so therefore we're required to ask for that use variance.
Other questions?
It looks like it was being used as a parking lot not too long ago, is that right?
Yes, it's currently paved.
And this
No, it won't be. We'll have, you see the kind of the gray area around the edges, that'll be a landscape buffer. There already is some fencing, so we'll maintain that and continue that. There'll be some green area in the center of the parking lot, and then some shrubs along Nichols Ave.
Question to staff, do we have to give a variance on the coverage too? Because usually residential lot is something like 30-35%.
Well, this is for the use, which covers everything. Yes.
That's right, to use.
Can you estimate what coverage is in your plan? You're reducing the coverage actually.
Right. All right, so it's, so the parking coverage is 35% and the building coverage is 34%. Well, it's all one lot. So if you total it, it's about 70% coverage, let's say.
All right, thanks.
Other questions? Hearing none, I'll ask if, is anybody here to speak in favor of the application? Is anybody here to speak against the application? Hearing none, I'll close the case and we'll go on. Oh, there was somebody coming, I'm sorry.
Yes, hi, my name is Mark Edwards. My address is 305 Scott Home Boulevard in Syracuse. I don't know whether I'm in favor or against the project in this regard. I'd love to see the old Taft School stabilized. I am the executor of my mother's estate. We have 2 properties on the west side of the project, and there are a couple issues that we have to get straightened out. I've spoken with the developer. Our buildings are right along this edge, right in the middle of the project. And there is an easement that has serviced the back of our building historically, and if that easement is closed off to us, it does hamper the value of the property. In talking with Steve, we're going to look at resolving those issues. In the meantime, I have ordered a survey by Paul Oslowski for our properties to make sure we understand exactly where our borders are and what the issues are. So again, I'm all for that property being stabilized. It sounds great, but we do have issues in the borderline of our properties.
What would you like us to know or do, or are you just saying you figure you're going to be able to work this out?
That's my preference. And Steve and I know each other. We're going to try and see if we can figure out what the friction points are and if his design can accommodate us, and if not. So I guess to answer your question, what we're really looking for is time, because Paul said it would take 2 to 3 weeks to schedule his survey. I figured using Paul, because he knows the property as well already, and he's going to do it as quickly as he can.
So are you asking us to defer our vote to give you time?
Well, honestly, to convert the parking lot from residential to a business really doesn't affect us. It's moving forward with the design plans. And my understanding is that meeting, or there's a meeting on Monday night for that. Unfortunately, our survey won't be done by Monday, so, or Monday evening, isn't it?
Okay.
Monday evening, yes.
So that meeting is not the Board of Zoning Appeals, and our charge here is to approve the use. And what I'm hearing from you is that the parking lot's not the issue.
Correct. As far as I'm concerned, whether it's zoned one way or the other, it doesn't really affect our property. Our concern is easement to the back of our building, access to the doors back there, so they're not blocked off.
Okay. Thank you.
Before you
You got-
close,
yeah.
I have another question now. But let's go ahead and hear the,
Right.
I have another
Well,
question when they're
he's-
done.
Okay, well, he's done.
Still standing here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Does the applicant want to respond?
I just want to say, I think that this is, probably might be more geared towards the planning commission, but the meeting is on Monday. And that, I don't think either, however they resolve that, it wouldn't really have an impact to that parking lot. Since that access point is well over here, it wouldn't have changed any of the numbers or any of the use associated with the parking lot.
While you're here, this is a use variance. Could you explain why the property can't be used as a residential use?
Well, I think that we were saying that it's going to, it would almost render this building in almost an undevelopable state, because that parking lot's been associated with that building basically since it's been built. And, you know, if there were houses built on those, there would be no parking for that building.
So there's no possibility it could be used for a residential house, which is what it's zoned.
Oh, a single house for this, the building itself?
For the open lot.
No. I don't even know if there is a demand for individual residential houses on those lots. So it would, you know, have the potential of leaving those properties vacant and unused.
No, for a use variance, we just have to
Right.
have them,
Yeah,
have you explain why it cannot be used for what it's intended for before we can give you a use variance.
okay. All right, thanks.
So you're building apartments.
Well, we're renovating the building into apartments, an existing building.
And if we said, no, that needs a residential use, would you be able to have your apartment building?
No, because we wouldn't be able to meet the required parking numbers. We have 29 apartments, and we're creating 29 parking spaces.
Could give a variance for the parking.
Well, then, you know, where would the tenants park? You know, there'd be, I don't know what the demand would be for those apartments if they couldn't park.
Okay, thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to also state that I have a relationship with the tenant. I rent from one of his properties in the Eastwood Plaza. I still would like to vote on this issue. I did check with Heather and some of the other folks, and they thought it would be okay, since I have no direct relationship with this particular project.
Okay, thank you.
So, for transparency purposes, I just wanted to tell you I have a long-standing relationship with the applicant.
Thank you. Duly noted. We're all set, thank you.
Thank you.
Right. The next case, do you want to call it, or shall I?
The next case is I-22-01, an interpretation of city of Syracuse zoning rules and regulations as amended for the National Daycare Center.
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
Good afternoon, members of the board. My name is Attorney Kevin Barone. I work for Mangano Law Office, and I'm the representative for Mr. Ashish Desai and Nayan Mehta, who are the proposed purchasers of 901 Lodi Street in the city of Syracuse. We are here today on behalf of my clients to talk about the interpretation of the definition of daycare within the zoning regulations. My clients intend to build an adult daycare center at the property 901 Lodi Street. And I've submitted a memorandum outlining our position on the interpretation to the city zoning. And I'd like to say their business is to develop what we'd call an adult daycare center. It's a social model as opposed to a medical model. So what that means is that it would not be considered a care home within the definition of the zoning rules. Just social in nature, which means that you don't need medical staff, and it doesn't need to be in a zone where you would see typically medical facilities. The social program would provide a myriad of activities for adults, older adults from 60 years of age and over, and practically speaking, the service that they're going to be providing meets the exact definition of daycare center within the regulations, absent the name children. Now, in reviewing the code at length, I believe that their proposed use is not a non-conforming use because the zoning regulations themselves do not have a definition for adult daycare. It's only daycare. But I would argue that under the principles of statutory interpretation, that the omission of adult daycare was a function of the fact that at the time when the rules were adopted in the 1960s, the average life expectancy was about 70.1 years old. As we all know, folks are living a lot longer now, and I just mentioned that factoid just to state that I don't think it was on the minds of the drafters of the zoning regulations that something like an adult daycare would need to exist at the time. I think it was more geared towards a medical model. But again, as I said here, this is a strictly social model, and I think within the confines of the definition itself, I think that this fits squarely within the definition of daycare if we were able to interpret it as both considering children and adult. I would also like to mention that my clients, both here today, are obviously in support of this interpretation. They operate 4 social model adult daycares throughout New Jersey, Connecticut, Pennsylvania, and I've submitted documentation and marketing materials to the city zoning, evidencing that. But you know, they have a lot of experience in this field, and I believe that approving this and allowing this interpretation to go forward would be hugely beneficial to the city of Syracuse, in particularly the location of this facility. There is apartment complex that has a medium of age that is squarely within the clientele that they're going to target here, and I think that it would be great for the city itself. So at this point, I'd like to ask if you have any questions for myself and/or my clients.
Are the clients customers of this daycare? Are they dementia patients, or are they just ordinary folks that have nothing to do?
Just ordinary folks, 60 years and older, that want to, you know, go play cards or watch movies or do Tai Chi or yoga.
So would that exclude, dementia, Alzheimer's people? Is it specifically for healthy seniors?
Yes.
So so if somebody called and said, I need respite because my father or mother lived with me, got dementia or Alzheimer, they would be rejected?
I believe that what we're proposing, this model would not, it would not be applicable to someone who had dementia. It would have to be, I mean, that would fit more within the medical model of adult daycare, which is currently, being provided by like a Loretto Pace or something of that nature.
Gotcha. Karen? Yeah, question.
Do you have a litmus test of who's healthy or not?
They're asking, excuse me one more.
Yeah. You're welcome to come up and talk, sir, if you like.
Thank you. Sorry about that. So essentially and again, the litmus test would be if someone is able to come there and doesn't need one-on-one medical care and could be within the facility without a one-on-one, caregiver, then they would be able to participate in the program.
And I just need to interject. I want you to keep in mind, this is not about this specific property or this specific program. This is about an interpretation of a general definition to include adults. This would be citywide.
With
And
daycare.
anywhere daycare was allowed, children and adults would be permitted
Right.
to attend.
Yeah.
The individual
This will-
operator
Yeah.
would be able to accept or not whomever their program was established for. We could not,
So this
however,
would
we
be
could
different-
not be biased and prejudiced of who would be there in our definition.
Okay, so my question about that is, the applicant makes the argument that this is not medically oriented. Are you saying a daycare center is a place where you take your kids to spend the day? It's not a medical facility either. I don't think any of them are,
Correct.
right? That would be a different sort of situation.
Yes.
So we are taking we're not taking the word out, but we're putting the word in. Child daycare center, adult are the same thing in our interpretation if we decide that. So this is, but it's still not a medical facility that we
Correct.
are approving. It's the model that we're used to, that we brought our kids to, a daycare center. Okay.
Yes, so if I could
You could.
read the definition.
Page 81 in our packet.
Okay, hold on, I can't see. All right, so I'll read it for you. Okay. Care of children away from their homes for less than 24 hours a day in an individual's home, a day nursery or other place operated by an individual, an association, corporation, institution, or agency operated for such purpose, for compensation or otherwise for at least 3 hours a day for the accommodation of 7 or more children. The word children, after the word children, if you approve this as requested to interpret that adults should also be included in this, it would simply say care of children and/or adults away from their home, and at the end, for 7 or more children and/or adults. And that's what the petitioner is asking you to interpret, that this is akin to
Understood, yeah.
If we were
a daycare center for people of all ages.
all ages, that's where I was going. So there would be no age restriction essentially on this definition anymore. It could be not just adults, but people of any age.
Yes.
It doesn't have to be elderly.
Yes.
So,
And to clarify, it's not specific to this property.
No.
This will change the definition.
This was the impetus to ask the question.
I don't always give away my cards, but when I read this, I wrote down 3 things that out of my head. That the concept of an adult daycare center is much newer, as you said. It's needed more today, as you said. And what else did I say? Oh, and I know that they exist elsewhere. So my thoughts aligned exactly with what I read here. I don't know if you want,
But nobody would be staying overnight and such, so.
No.
it's a daycare.
Yeah, their program, it meets exactly within the definition of daycare right now, the hours and the amount of people, exactly.
I just have a quick question, Mr. Chairman. When it said medical and nursing services, I'm assuming as part of the scope of services that are going to be provided, I'm assuming that's just having medical services on hand just in case something happens,
Yes, exactly.
correct?
Yes.
All right, so, and my next question is, I see English classes. So I'm assuming that since we have a lot of internationals here in Syracuse, if there needed to be English services provided, that you will have those with maybe the multiplicity of languages that people would be speaking. Am I correct in that assumption?
Yeah,
Yes.
Let me remind you that we are not gonna, we're interpreting the law,
That's right.
not their facility.
Not the services, that's, yes, I heard that clearly with Heather. I just asked the question
Yes.
out of curiosity,
Yes.
Mr. Chairman.
Yeah.
And we're happy to indulge.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Do I ask for comments from the audience, Heather, as usual?
Yes.
Or not? Okay, thank you. Is there
Thank
anybody
you.
here who wishes to speak in favor of the application? Because I wasn't sure, because this is an interpretation, not a variance, so.
Hello, my name is Jen Schultz. I live at 710 Rugby Road in Syracuse. And I'm totally in favor of this request and change in the definition of the zoning from children daycare to include all ages. Obviously, aging population, he mentioned that. This particular area especially is in dire need of this type of facility, if you will, not to get into the details. You know what's adjacent to it: Green Skyline, Ross Tower, Villa Scalabrini, Victory Baptist Church, the incredible population of New Americans. So I can't even think of a more perfect use for that property, and I applaud the folks who are working to make this happen. So I'm also the First District Common Councilor, and that is my district, so I'm really connected to the whole area for more than one reason. So I hope you'll definitely revise the language.
Thank you, Counselor.
Thank you.
Nice to see you and meet you. Anybody else want to speak in favor of the application? Anybody want to speak against the application, or this case?
Just one comment before you close it off. We're developing zoning code, rezoning Syracuse. I hope new language will be included in rezoning that reflects the.
It already is.
Already is.
Yeah, okay.
All right.
Okay. Okay, thanks. We'll close that and go to the next one.
Thank you. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Next case is 3-22-04, an area variance request to construct an addition by waiving structural coverage on property located at 448 Plymouth Drive, owned by Larry and Sabrina Denton, zoned residential class A1.
Is the applicant here? Oh, hi.
Hi, my name is Sabrina Vincent Denton. My husband is Larry Denton. He's not here today. He has to work. And we're asking for a
What's your address? Is it 440?
448 Plymouth Drive,
Thank you. Go ahead.
Syracuse, New York.
Right.
And we're asking for a area variance to go 3 feet beyond what was, I guess, normal.
What the regulation is, yeah.
Yes, what the regulation is.
Okay. And tell us what you're going to be doing with that?
We are going to be expanding our kitchen, adding a bathroom. We only have one bathroom that we have raised our family in for the last 23 years. So we did that with one bathroom, which was quite difficult, and adding a downstairs bedroom for my husband and I, because we're getting older and we want this to be the place where we stay.
Question?
We're always supposed to be looking for the least possible variance, so it looks like if you didn't go out 3 feet, you wouldn't have had to ask for a variance. Can you explain why you needed that extra feet, 3.5 feet or something?
Yes. The 3.5, it was designed before without the extra 3.5 feet. The 3.5 feet is a back door. We were told that we didn't have to have a back door, which is actually a side door. But I think it's important, if this is going to be a place where we age, that I think there needs to be a secondary exit that you don't have to go all the way to the front of the house for, and, you know.
Thank you very much. Anybody wish to speak in favor of the application? Anybody wish to speak against the application?
We do have a letter from a neighbor at 450 Plymouth, Andrew Eastham, and I believe Lisa handed that out to you. So that would, if you'd like to read that and those concerns, you may wish to incorporate any of those into your decision.
If you consider regarding its impact on his property. runoff.
Well, let's ask the applicant to address any of these.
Have you seen
I
this?
didn't get a letter, no.
Oh,
No, we just got it today at 12:11.
Yeah, no, I just meant like right now.
Concerned about water runoff as a result of this change?
oh, and I guess just doing the job, whether their property will be ripped up, right?
Materials, transportation materials.
It's a lot of stuff.
And that, those can be conditions because the DPW Superintendent of Sewers and Sanitation said the exact same thing. Stormwater runoff cannot adversely impact adjoining properties, so.
So let me just, in looking at this, the author of this letter says, please provide written notification addressing these issues prior to commencement of work. Are these issues that affect our decision at all?
Potentially.
Well, the new construction, the plans for a permit will be reviewed by the different departments who will have those conditions, as you see that they've already said to us. That's one reason that we send projects out to the different departments. So that will have to be addressed, no matter what.
I believe it does conform with the side setbacks suggested at the rear.
Yes, this is for structural coverage. It has too much structural coverage, which is a stormwater management concern. That's why we have a cap on structural coverage.
But there's no setback issue.
Yes.
I think he's referring to that concrete slab to the side of the house. I don't know what stairs he's referring to exactly. Are there stairs on the side of the house?
No, I think he's talking about the side door that would be added.
Oh, that you can see on the exterior elevations?
But again, that, I would assume that would have to be addressed through the design review process and the eventual permitting process, that those would be, you know, reviewed.
Yeah, well, it wouldn't have it wouldn't be considered a structure, the stairs or the slab. So it wouldn't need to meet setback requirements, as it's currently shown anyways.
So taking his letter in turn, one will be addressed through the design process. Two, we don't really have any.
No, that seems like to be a discussion between the applicant and your neighbor.
And
Number two.
he is in compliance because the stairs don't count in the setback.
Right, because you have to be able to get, if there needs to be
Right.
stairs to get somewhere, it wouldn't make you jump.
So there's not a ton we can do. I mean, thank you for your
No.
letter, sir, but not a
But
ton
you
we
can
do.
condition it on the DPW's comments.
But do,
Runoff issues have to be dealt with.
Yeah,
but do we need the condition, isn't that kind of belt and suspender? I mean, aren't those issues gonna be addressed anyways, whether we condition it or not?
Yeah, but this could re-emphasize it just in case. It's up to the board.
Yeah,
What
okay.
you want to do. But we provide the comments from the different departments so you can make an informed decision. And all of our resolutions do say this does not relieve the applicants from any and all local, state, federal compliance, permits, licensing, et cetera. But it would perhaps, it wouldn't be, how do I say this? It wouldn't not be beneficial to have an extra emphasis on the stormwater runoff because of the extra structural coverage in the resolution, if you so chose.
Okay.
Sounds good. Now, here's what he says. Applicant is responsible to contain and manage new stormwater runoff protection. Will create runoff, not create adverse effect by to adjoining properties or pay for
lot coverage waiver.
What department is that?
Engineering.
So do they get to speak to the engineering department for consult on that or anything?
Yeah, they have.
It's part of the
We're gonna go
permit
through
process.
design review.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If it does
the
cause
permit.
problems, there'll need to be mitigation,
Right.
and that will be seen probably through an inspection or complaints from the neighbor.
And you're
afterwards.
suggesting that we can mention that in our...
Absolutely, yes.
our
Reasonable
motion, okay.
conditions are something that you can impose on a decision.
And like I said, number 2, do you know this, Mr. Eastman?
Yes.
Okay, so,
Spoke with him several times, which is why I'm
Okay.
very surprised.
well, it's okay, I mean, he's got concerns and he's, you know,
The important
Put them
phrase
in
here, I
order.
think, is I have no concerns with the variance.
right. So you may want to have a conversation with him too, especially to make sure, the number 2 thing is important, that you don't mess up his place, and there should be a plan for that, so. Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Did I ask already if anybody wants to speak? Does anybody want to speak in favor of the application? Does anybody want to speak against the application? Hearing none, we'll get to our next one. My curiosity, the next one, I'm just curious, these are usually under new business as opposed to discussion?
Yeah, it should be new business.
It should be new business.
Sorry about that.
Okay, so, but then we have another discussion
Yes.
after that. Okay, well, we can do this first, doesn't matter.
Yep.
So this is new business.
So the new business item is B1715M1. This is originally was an area variance to waive the required yards from this board. And the request is for facade and floor plan modifications, which does not alter the required yards that you already gave relief from, but the project is a little bit different. In addition, there is a request for a 5th time extension. And I would like, because we received several sets of plans in a very short period of time, the applicant's representative architect is here, and I'd like him to speak if you have any questions about the details of what is changing and why the next extension is necessary. So Andrew Schuster is here.
Sounds good.
How you doing? Andrew Schuster, 203 Wellesley Road, Syracuse, New York. I'm just here representing,
Could you say your name again, please? That was...
yeah, sorry, Andrew Schuster,
Right, okay.
203 Wellesley Road. I'm here to just speak on behalf of my client, the owner, and the purchaser of the property. Last summer, we were here to ask for an extension while the owner found a new equity partner for the project to complete the job. Instead, their new equity partner has decided to purchase the property from them and complete the development. They'd like to complete the development as approved with some minor modifications, none of which impact the waivers that this committee has provided the project in the past. So they're looking really for an extension until next summer so that their lenders can be certain that the project is viable. Yeah, so previously the lobby of the building was behind the Church First Christ Scientist, the existing church. They felt that that's not a great, from a safety standpoint for their tenants, as well as not a very clear place to enter the building, so they wanted to move it to the front. We currently are looking at using the church as a retail establishment, which they're looking for tenants for, as well as that front part of the building was intended to be retail. They'd like to combine that as a retail as well as the entrance to the building with a stair going up so that the resident lobby would actually be on the second floor, but the space that is the retail space would also be accessible as the access to that resident lobby. The other changes are the fire service and all of that is moving to where the previous lobby is. And on the upper floors, in order to just reduce some of the square footage, they're looking to set back away from the church a couple of feet, about 5 feet from where they are now. So they're really minor. The unit count's the same. The unit mix is a little bit more weighted towards one-bedroom units, but the total units are the same. We're not modifying the parking area, and not modifying the site plan at all. So it really is a fairly minor set of changes, at least in my opinion.
I walk by that old church building every once in a while.
Oh, really?
Somebody pulled off or scrapped. Will the new owners be securing that building?
They will, yes. They are committed to completing the job. You know, the whole reason this building is shaped the way it is and designed the way it is so that church can remain. And they're just as committed to keeping that and fixing it as the previous owners were, which, I mean, obviously they have not been maintaining as well as I would have liked. But but they do intend to convert it into publicly available uses per our original application.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Anybody have anything to say about this? Do I have to do that again?
No.
No, okay, sorry. Okay, so, thanks. That, and the next portion of our program?
The next item is a discussion item, and our office received a draft environmental impact statement for the project at 910 Madison Street, which we have given you in those binders, and Brody Smith, the attorney that is assisting the city with this seeker process, is here to help explain what your task is now.
And we received the executive summary to review for this meeting as well.
And it is in that big binder. Yep.
That too.
Mr. Chair, would it be possible to vote on the action items? No, so that they can leave?
They can, you're not having a great time?
Middle of the day.
Okay, so we want to, there is a suggestion
Just
to go to what we've done so far. Anybody have any problem with that? I have no problem with that. It's a fine idea. Okay, V22-01, use variance waive permitted uses, 3020 James Street. Is there a motion? Parking lot that needs a use variance for commercial.
I would make a motion to approve.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Your rationale, please.
Yes, on the first of the tests, the applicant cannot realize a reasonable rate of return. As noted, it is a split-zoned lot with a current residential use and an intended future residential use on it, so this is more of an accessory than its own separate lot. And the parking is necessary as a market amenity for the building to be used going forward. So I would say that without parking, the building would be very difficult to rent and therefore not return a reasonable return. Second, the alleged hardship relating to the property is unique. Split zoning is very unique in the city, as we are aware. And so this particular issue is not going to affect a substantial portion of the neighborhood. It is currently a parking lot and it's going to be continued to use as a parking lot. In fact, will be improved. So it will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood. And the alleged hardship has not been self-created in that it has been a parking lot since before zoning, apparently, so.
Okay, who seconded?
I did.
Any addition to that, Mr. Jennings?
The only thing that I would say is I don't have any addition. I agree with everything that has been stated, but from Eastwood Plaza to the Palace Theater, Mr. Skinner has been doing incredible things with Eastwood and the number of businesses that he started. There's 30 businesses right within the Eastwood Plaza. And I would also say that I would back anything that this young man would do based on the fact that I know that the Eastwood Plaza was on its last leg, about ready to go into bankruptcy, and with his hard work and diligence to this city and this community, that project is going to be beautiful once he's finished with it. So if you just go up and down James Street, you look at Sinbad, the restaurant, the door grooming, the plant store, the 30 businesses that are in the Eastwood Plaza, I just know that the project is going to be done with just expertise, and it'll make us all very proud.
Thank you. Any other comments, discussion? Then I'm going to call a vote. All those in favor of approving the variance?
Yes. Oh, I would make a seeker recommendation of a negative declaration.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
I'll abstain for reasons previously stated.
Passes 6 yes and 1 abstention. Next is the interpretation of the daycare center definition, I-22-01. Is there a motion to agree about amending the definition of a daycare center?
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
There are, as we're aware,
Can I just interject? The motion, I just want to clarify, it's not amending the definition, it's interpreting. Yes.
what standards do we need to apply?
Common sense.
I mean, the problem with that is that we're interpreting, but it says child. So if we were interpreting it, it says child.
Right, you're interpreting that this is similar and akin to services that would be offered for children.
Okay, good, thank you.
My motion is that we, this ordinance to include people of all ages.
I agree.
Okay, so that's the motion, and did you, okay, is that the motion now?
I did, and I have nothing to add to.
Anybody else? Okay, I'll call the question. All those in favor of our interpretation as proposed, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That's unanimous. Opposed, abstentions, no. Thank you. V-2204, area variance, waive structural coverage at 448 Plymouth Drive. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Discussion-wise, did you want to add in the issue?
Yes, with particular concern to drainage issues being addressed in the planning for this, I guess in the permits that are pulled too. So are there alternative solutions available that the variance is not needed? I think that the design of the addition would suffer if it were made to conform to the exact standards for coverage. What is the magnitude of the variance being requested? It's a little more than 2%. Will there be an adverse effect on the surrounding neighborhood? If constructed properly, no, I don't think there will be such a negative influence. And is this a self-created difficulty? It is not.
Who seconded? Yes, I'm sorry.
I have nothing to add.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say that when I see stuff,
On coverage-wise, yes.
all those in favor of approving the variance, say aye.
Aye.
Unanimous. Next is B1715M1, to the time extension for 728 East Genesee Street. Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion. Extension
And the modifications.
and the modifications, yes.
Got a rationale for that? Yeah.
The modifications make sense and are negligible, and, I think the reasoning for the extension makes sense. New owner, being a lender, I understand that you need to have something that's legal before you're gonna close on a construction loan, so.
Okay. All those in favor of approving the time extension and modification, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, we have done that.
Okay, so next is the discussion item, and our office has received a draft environmental impact statement for the project at 910 Madison Street, and Brody Smith, the attorney assisting the city with seeker, is here to speak about that and your tasks at hand.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I have passed out a visual aid to help reorient you with this application because it's been a little while. Briefly, to refresh your
Could you
recollection.
just do our name and address, please?
Say again?
Your name and address.
Oh, sure. Brody Smith, Bond, Shinnick and King, 1 Lincoln Center, Syracuse.
Thank you.
As Heather mentioned before, I represent this board, and I'm here to help walk you through the seeker process. This application was made to construct a apartment building, and they required multiple area variances. As part of this board's process, you went through the seeker process and found issued a positive declaration based on one of the factors that you reviewed in the EAF, in the environmental assessment form. And the positive declaration concerned historic and cultural resources. Where this redevelopment would occur, there is a historic building present, Temple Concord. So after your positive declaration, the next step that the board took was to approve a scope for the environmental impact statement. Anytime this board issues a positive declaration under seeker, the next requirement is for the applicant to prepare an environmental impact statement. So you approved a scope, and then that scope was provided to the applicant, and some time has passed. Well, they took the time to prepare an environmental impact statement. They have now submitted to you a draft environmental impact statement. The next action required by this board is to determine whether or not that environmental impact statement is complete, not whether or not it's final, not to vote on the adequacy of the information or anything like that. The next step is for you to make a determination as to whether the draft that they submitted is complete. You have 45 days from the day that they submitted it to determine whether it is complete. You do not need to do that at this meeting. You can do that at the next meeting and still comply with the 45-day deadline. It's my understanding you're being provided with it now. So the intention is for you to look at the scope. Remember, the scope is the board setting forth what they want studied in the EIS, and now the applicant has submitted a draft, and you should look at the two side by side and determine whether or not they have provided a complete EIS. So in the piece of paper that I provided to you, this is something that's produced by the DEC. If you look on the back, there's a flow chart, and it's a good reference tool. In the flow chart, what I've just described to you is where we are in these steps, and we're in step 7. So step 7, draft EIS prepared for lead agency acceptance. You either accept it as complete, which would be step 8, and we move on to the public comment process on the DEIS, or it's not complete, and you go back and you tell them in what way it is deficient. If you turn over the piece of paper that gives the time frames that I just described to you, the 45-day time frame from the time that they've submitted it to you to when you determine that it's complete. So again, I should emphasize that the next steps will maybe help clarify what you need to do at this point. Let's assume you determine at your next meeting that it is complete. The next steps, you'll then have a complete DEIS, provide it to the public, and give the public an opportunity to comment. It will be the option of the board whether you have people comment just in writing or whether you have a public hearing. Seeker does not require public hearings, but you may require a public hearing in an instance like this. So when you open up that period after you determine there's a complete document that people can comment on, Then you can get into the content of it, right? The adequacy of the mitigation, whether you agree or disagree with the conclusions, that sort of thing. At this step, the board's not being, secret doesn't require the board to critique whether you agree with the content of the information provided, but rather whether or not they have complied with the scope document, if that makes sense. So it's an easier task than your next task, is one way to think of it. Once you go through that public comment process, you'll get comments on the DEIS. The applicant will be required to reply to those comments, and eventually they may make adjustments to it based on direction from the board and in response to comments from the public. And then another document will be produced, and that'll be the final EIS. And then the final EIS will be something that you'll up or down. You'll adopt it or have them go back and make revisions. So there's a couple steps. I guess what I'm saying is there's a couple steps to follow, but this is the next step. Again, no board vote is required today. I would encourage you to review the scope, review the draft environmental impact statement that was submitted by the applicant, and be prepared to make a determination at the next meeting whether you deem it to be complete. And I'll pause there for questions.
Okay, so first, who is deliberating on this?
You are.
Oh, no. I mean, who, from the beginning, only 5 of us were present.
Yeah, I think that because we've moved beyond the public hearing and the content of the variance and we're into the secret process, I think the entire board can deliberate on this. I think we've reset to a new item. Yeah.
Does that mean then that when we get back to the variances, that the whole board will be eligible as well? So it's starting kind of anew.
Going to be a new hearing.
Second question. Who's going to decide, or is it already decided, that we're expected to do this at the next meeting, so we know that we have to be prepared for the next meeting? Or are we going to vote on that?
Who has decided?
No.
In other words, do we have to, should we be ready to make this decision at the next meeting?
Yeah, I mean,
whether it's complete, yes. So the reason I say that is the state statute requires you to do it within 45 days of receiving it.
When did we receive it? Like, what's our deadline?
So did the clock start?
yeah, what day is it?
The clock started when they submitted it, and so you have Heather and I did the math. You have this meeting and next meeting, but not a third meeting to meet the 45-day deadline.
meeting.
Yeah.
So,
When did, okay.
Yeah.
Like last week. Or April.
Yeah. Recently.
You
Yeah.
physically just got it right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, that doesn't count for the 45 days.
April. Oh, got it.
Yeah.
We have to make a decision.
At the next meeting.
Right.
So we're going to decide if they have covered what they said in the scope. That's what you mean by complete.
Right.
Then after that, let's say at the next meeting, we are going to decide whether we're going to talk about and vote on whether there would be public hearings or not, right?
Good question. Yeah, what I would recommend at the next meeting is to, number one, make a determination on completeness. Assuming it's complete, then the board should decide whether or not you want to have a public hearing. Assuming that you decide you do want to have a public hearing, that public hearing will need to be noticed at least 10 days before the hearing, and following the hearing, you'll need to allow at least 14 days to allow people to submit written statements. The statute also provides that from the time that you determine it's complete, you have a maximum of 60 days to finish the next step in the process, the evaluation of the draft environmental impact statement, if you require a public hearing. If you decide you don't want to have a public hearing, which you may decide at the next meeting, then it would be, the time frame would be 30 days. You'd give people 30 days to provide, comments, and then you would make a determination after that. So.
Okay, just one more question for me. So we review this, we say it's complete. We do the hearing, either written or in person. What is our final vote on? Accepting, what would be the word? Approving, accepting?
What's the determination you make at the next meeting?
No.
No.
What's the final determination on the EIS?
So once you get all the way to the end of the EIS, skip ahead several steps. You'll have a final environmental impact statement that you will approve or not. You'll approve it or not. And so what the statute says is that this board and any legislative board, every planning board, zoning board, council, have to consider environmental impacts before you make a decision. Your decision is still going to be whether or not you grant the variances, but you are required by state statute to consider the environmental impacts before you make that decision. And the environmental impact statement is the process that you use to evidence that you considered those impacts. So when you eventually accept the EIS, it's not necessarily an approval or a disapproval of the variances.
No, it is of the EIS, and then we go back and have hearings on the variances.
Yeah, then you still have to vote on the
Right,
variances.
okay,
So that's your evidence that I did what I'm required to do under state law. I considered the impacts on the environment, in this case specifically on historic and cultural resources. And then you'll be free once you make that determination that you feel that they've provided you with adequate information to then go ahead and continue with your normal process and make a determination on the area variance.
Yeah, for staff, for the outside counsel to our, okay. Thank you for the explanation, very thorough, appreciate it. Do you have a recommendation as to which way we should go on the public hearing side? Should it be on the public comment period? Given the volatility of this case, is it better to recommend something in writing or to hold a public hearing on public comment?
Yeah. So as I mentioned before, you're under no legal obligation under seeker. There's no hard and fast rule that says you have to have a public hearing as part of the EIS process. That being said, if you look at the DEC's handbook, where it talks about the EIS process, they give some guidance as to when it's wise or not wise to have a public hearing. And as you might expect, what the DEC would say is if there is a lot of public interest, that weighs in favor of having a public hearing.
Okay.
So I can tell you that. That's what the DEC says.
That helps answer my question. Thank you. Yeah.
Correct.
Right, those will be public hearings where you have a choice.
Yeah, I mean, it's because you've had a public hearing on the variance. It's conceivable that you may not be required to have a second public hearing if it doesn't change. What remains to be seen is through this process, will the project change? Right. I would say from a legislative point of view, that public hearing isn't stale or anything. It just if there are modifications to the project.
So we could go back and open up the variance hearings again after all this is done.
Yeah, just because you pause deck something doesn't negate everything you did before.
Did we close the hearing earlier on? We did.
Yeah.
Okay. There will be comments on the draft. Do we have to determine whether they address those comments before we move forward?
That's right. So after completeness, opens up the draft process. People comment on the draft. The applicant will be required to respond to those comments. If anyone's ever seen an EIS, when you hear draft and final, you think, oh, they rewrote it. What it really is, it's the draft, and then it's a comment and response document, usually is what's on top of it, where they say, these are the comments we got and these are responses to it. Sometimes, there's adjustments made to the text as well, but sometimes you see a final EIS and it's just a document on top of the draft with comments and responses. And so yes, you'll need to make a determination at that point whether or not all the comments have been adequately addressed and whether you think the mitigation is adequate and those issues. And I'll advise you about that at that time. But yes, you will have the opportunity, if you feel that comments have been ignored, to require the applicant to go back and address additional comments. And that you'll see that's another loop on this DEC flow chart on the back here. You can follow that line too when you get to step 11 there.
Practical question, I don't have time today to go through this, and if you set somewhere where we can come in and take a look.
Those are yours to take.
Yeah,
It's
we're
yours to
taking
take.
it.
Well, each of us has one?
Yeah, look.
Yep,
There were 7 copies.
paper.
Is the scope in here, Brody?
I don't know, Heather,
Your staff report.
it's in your
Oh, so I
packet.
need to keep
And I can tell you, I printed one out, I can tell you what the scope looks like.
Yeah, I mean, I saw it in.
It's
in
this
the-
document here.
I saw it in what we got at home, and I was just asking if I needed to.
So on the top, it says final scope project action, 910 Madison Avenue development. And if you, just to refresh your memory, and go back to the scope, you're essentially dictating the table of contents. When you require an applicant to do an EIS, they don't get to write about whatever they want. They write about what you want them to write about. And so your scope is where you dictated the table of contents into what it's going to be, chapter and verse, what issues they're going to address. So the step that's immediately in front of you is to determine whether or not your table of contents, your scope, matches their table of contents, the draft that they wrote.
Can I ask one question, please? And forgive my ignorance here. So, I am to review this. Next month, we come back and we make a group decision, Mr. Chairman? And once that group decision is made, once this goes to public comment, then, Brody, we make another final decision as to whether to accept the report based on the public comments?
Right, so you're determining whether it's complete now, then you put it out to the world, everybody comments on it, and then you'll have an opportunity after that, when they submit a
Final.
draft final, you'll make a determination as to whether or not their final environmental impact statement addressed all the comments that you heard.
So then that's a two-step process then?
Oh, so-
correct?
More than 2, probably.
But I mean, you know, right here where it says a public hearing, public comment after that period of time, if we have one, right?
No,
if you decide to have
definitely
a public hearing.
The public gets to comment,
That's right.
yes.
Okay, fine. And then once we have that process determined, then we get together as a board again for the final EIS.
Yeah,
but
and there'll be
there's
a gap there because they have to write it.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's
So
right.
it goes back to the applicant.
Yeah.
That's right.
They look at the comments, maybe refine something, then we get this again.
That's right.
And that's when we,
Okay, so, Mr. Chairman, next month, we have to be ready to.
yes,
discuss.
we all have homework to do, you know, so.
Yes?
Yeah, when's the,
Next month.
There will be a.
well, when's the next meeting?
May 12th.
May 12th, May 12th.
Yeah, so next month. Oh,
So make sure you
yeah,
do
that's-
two things. Determine whether it's complete, and if it is complete, determine whether or not you want to have a public hearing.
I'm-
Yep.
How does the public know about this?
or-
Paper, or you send postcards, how do they know about this?
So there's a couple things. We are required by state law to publish a notice in the Environmental Notice Bulletin, which is a fancy way of saying the DEC website. So we're gonna, once you decide it's complete, we'll fill out the paperwork for you and make sure that goes up on the DEC's website. Then also when the public hearing happens, Heather will follow her usual procedure to publish notices of, assuming you have a public hearing, that a public hearing will occur. If there is not a public hearing, then we'll still send notices out to everybody who's commented in the past to notify them that they have an opportunity to comment during the 30-day window.
What happens if we turn down, if we say, no, this is not sufficient, what happens?
So if you make a determination that it's not complete, then you give it back to them and they will resubmit it. And they can take as long as they want to resubmit it. Once they resubmit it, you start the process again. You have 30 days to decide, instead of 45 days, the next time you'll have 30 days to decide whether or not you think the revisions make it complete.
Yeah, so what I was really asking is, in the end, they make their modifications, it comes back. Is it a given that we've gotten this far, they've made the modifications, and is that just a matter of course that we approve it, or what if we say we don't accept?
No, I mean, no. I wouldn't say that. Just because you said it's not complete and they revised something doesn't make it complete. It's got to be, it'll be complete when it matches the scope. Yeah.
Okay, I'm not talking about complete, or yeah, I
Yeah.
may not be understanding. I'm talking about approving it.
Oh, approving the final EIS.
Yeah, what if we don't approve it?
Yeah.
What if this board says we don't approve it?
Yeah, so the final EIS, remember, the determination that you'll be making there is to whether the environmental review, so this is not, that's not checking the box whether you just wrote about things we asked you to write about. That's, did you actually take a quote-unquote hard look on the significant adverse environmental impact that this board designated? When I say hard look, it's an odd phrase, but that's a legal term of art. That's the legal, that's what the court will ask, right? So what is a hard look? A hard look means that they evaluated the cultural and historic impact, adequate in your determination in terms of providing expert information from experts, adequately mitigating those impacts to the extent that is practical. And that's part, if you look in the EIS, that's part of the draft EIS, is they propose some mitigation. So those are the sort of things that you'll evaluate when you get to the end of this process, at the final EIS, when you determine whether to accept the final EIS.
Yeah, so my question was, what if we don't accept it?
Well, you got to go back and revise it. Yeah.
Okay, so
Yeah.
we have to revise it.
Yeah.
We can't make a decision without this information. We have to, when we make the decision, we're essentially saying, we know this is complete. We're not voting on whether this is.
Okay, so this is complete, and then we, when we're considering the variances, we consider what's in this report.
So this is, I think this is and this is not, this is most people with seeker. There's sort of this perception that you can, like, quote unquote win or lose an application seeker. That's not it. You're going to lose if we stumble procedurally. But remember, the purpose of seeker is to consider adverse impacts on the environment. In this case, cultural and historic resources is what we're considering. So this EIS is your ability to dictate to the applicant that they provide you information that you deem sufficient that says, we looked at the impacts. Not that there are no impacts, not that there are too many impacts, not that the impacts are acceptable, that, you know, that we now feel that we have sufficient information to weigh the impacts. Then you go back to your normal process that you know so well, with that knowledge as a tool in evaluating, you know, when you weigh the pluses and minuses in your 5 factors under the area variances, you now have the information you need to properly weigh those factors.
Okay, thank you.
So we've gotten this. We will say yes or no that it answered all, that addressed all the issues we asked it to address. Then there will be comments, and the comments will be treated the same way. They'll say you haven't addressed all the issues.
Well, the comments could be disagree. I expect there to be, right? Yeah. So they have their experts have evaluated architectural significance in a certain way. You know, the comments won't be about completeness, right? The comments will be, I disagree with certain conclusions, right? I have every expectation that there'll be some of those. And then, you know, then you'll have both sides of that argument that you can evaluate, and you can be better informed when you make your decision on the variance.
And after all that, we'll get another one of these, the final EIS.
Yeah, you can think of the FEAS as EIS. I mean, this is an imperfect analogy, but you can think of it as a rebuttal, right? So the DEIS is where the applicant puts out their position on these issues, the whole world comments, and then the FEIS is where they have an opportunity to respond to those comments.
These are, the issues here have to do with historical resources. At what point would or will the Landmark Preservation Board be involved?
Well, the Landmark Preservation Board can't take any action in terms of a vote until we complete our seeker process. But they can comment, just as the public can comment during that period, and you may evaluate their comments, and the applicant should respond to them.
And after it's complete, they will vote on this?
Say again?
The Landmark
Did you say the Landmark Preservation Board will vote on this somehow?
No, well, eventually as part of just your land use approval process, after, you know, assuming you do grant a variance, it'll go back to them, right, Heather? Perhaps?
They get to.
They're an involved agency. We
Yeah.
are sending after you say it's complete, if you say it's complete, when you say it's complete, I send it to the involved agencies, which includes more than just the Preservation Board, and they will comment, just like the public will.
Oh, when we say it's complete, it goes up, right, got it.
Yeah, so there's sort of two levels there, right? So that's the seeker level. They will have the ability to comment like everybody else. They're an involved agency like Heather stated, and I think there are others, and so they'll have an opportunity to comment. But once you're done with seeker, you know, just because they had an opportunity to comment during the seeker process doesn't change anything in the city code in terms of whatever approvals they either are required to or not required to give as part of your land use approval process will still be there. You're just the lead agency for seeker. You're taking care of seeker for everybody. And then everything will go back to your normal procedure after that.
Can the Landmark Preservation Board comment on the draft for the board before they determine completeness?
About whether it's complete? They could. I mean, nothing stops them from doing that. They're not required. This is not going to be put out for formal comment until you decide it's complete. But this is a public document. It's foilable. It's in the world. If the Preservation Committee wants to comment on that, they may.
If we had any questions, do we ask Heather or could we call Brody directly?
I'll defer to Heather, how you want to handle that.
Okay, thank you, Heather.
Well, any questions should be in a public forum, so,
I mean, in reading the material. Same thing, public, okay? Okay.
you can't have a private conversation with me.
So bring.
Very good.
Bring your.
Thank you.
Bring your questions. Okay, thank you very, very much. You're all good and clear and thorough. We appreciate that. And
My pleasure to help.
We
See you soon.
we hope you'll be with us every step of the way, so.
I will.
Okay, so. I don't want to talk content now. I really don't. I don't want to get into a
Decision.
discussion. Okay. Do we, any vote needed on this?
No.
Okay, authorizations. There are two for next time. Is there a motion to?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor, say aye.
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 Sorry.
Claire, who seconded?
I got Michael.
Okay.
No, I made the motion.
Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Good job, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Mike, yeah. Thank you. Thanks, everyone, for coming. It's great to see you.